I had what most people dreamed. I had the $1 million home, married with the picture-perfect wedding, and of course, the marvelous glam and glitter of work with my high-profile clientele. That was the life I had lived for quite some time. I was raised by a traditional Filipino Indian family, which always taught me that perfectionism and educational success and excellence was the most important thing in life. However, things changed. At the age of 10, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and after 6 years of battling that cancer, she passed away. Life had to go on, and now the responsibilities as the only woman left inside the house. As time went by, much of the grieving that we thought subsided, and just like it felt like we can breathe again, my brother DJ, he was the joy of the family that kept us living on. And one day, his lungs collapsed over his heart, and he died immediately. Can you believe it was on my youngest brother Vinay's 12th birthday? And it was 2 tragedies that I had in a year. Our entire family was in shock. We were paralyzed. It sent my dad into deep depression, and now I had to be the mother to my youngest brother Vinay. And after years of pain, we felt like we were finally getting back on track, trying to piece together why so many of these things were happening. We had a family event, and my dad decided that it was time to dye his silver gray hair slick black. My dad had a horrible allergic reaction to the hair dye. His face blew up twice the size, and after multiple tests, we learned that he had stage 4 lung cancer. He died 9 months later. So after losing my mother, losing my brother, and then losing my father, I had my youngest brother left, and I was an orphan at 19. You see, the perception of having it all doesn't always seem like everything, when on the inside, you're actually trapped and confused. After I finally had the courage to leave my marriage, my home, and the life that came along with it, I finally felt free for the first time in my life. I started growing at an exponential rate and sharing my story and realizing how many people and women and leaders in general started relating to different points of my story, and being open about my vulnerabilities granted me more access to so many different types of people. With the implementation of emotional grit and resilience, several leaders and game changers, local heroes and CEOs started to ask so many more questions of that foundation that I was building. Never in a million years would I have thought that that girl who thought she had to be would make it out on the other side. And today I am so humbled to share that the commitment of bringing out revolutionary game changers in this world is to help millions of other people lay that foundation of their emotional grit, of their stories. By implementing emotional grit into your own lives and the need for putting your very own well-being first and filling your cup up first is what we are truly inspired by.
So thank you, Regina. Thank you for allowing this to happen and for me to just share this powerful dialogue that we don't really get to talk about so much. And this is kind of coming on the other side. And so what I want you to get out of this hour that we have today is a few things, actually. I'm actually going to lay out the types of avatars that you probably have in your family, and there are 4. So there's 4 types of avatars. And if you wanted to take notes, or obviously at Google everything is systematized, so this is great. You can kind of watch this over and over again. And we are going into the holiday season, and so you'll be able to kind of hopefully take a few nuggets away. And so so that's one thing, is identifying the avatars of these people. Maybe you resonate with them because you are one of these, or you have been one of these types. Or you work with some of these people, and we kind of want to know the perception and the perspective. And so I share that video and I share that story and I share my belief with you all, not to say that, oh my gosh, she's had such a incredible story. While I mean, we've all been through shit. We've all had stuff happen. Some of you might think that it's happened to you. Some of you might think that it's actually happened for you. And so how do we then take the situations, the circumstances, the obstacles, the things that happen in our lives and actually change our perspective or change the meaning behind it? So two things, perception and perspective. And then third, I'm going to talk to you guys about an approach called the Kovac Approach. Because if we are to change the whole paradigm of what empathy is, because obviously empathy really starts with yourself. So if I wasn't honest, or if I wasn't authentic, if I wasn't courageous, if I didn't have compassion for myself, how can I actually share that with all of you? So you see, it really comes from some of the greatest triumphs in our own life or the greatest pains in our own life to really then understand and have this dialogue of empathy with other people. Maybe the people that you're sitting next to, or the people that you have in your own life, or maybe that boss or manager or relative that you just can't seem to get along with. Maybe instead of judging them, you can pick from a different type of perspective to really understand, well, gosh, what have they actually been through? And obviously, it's taken my entire life to come up with this whole approach, which now, obviously, I've done in a book, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. Oh, do they know about the book? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, great. I don't know how much you guys know or not, but from that story, how many of you guys can relate to some degree? Yeah. And while our stories are different, the feelings are the same. And I want to say that again, while our stories could be vastly different, culturally, globally, the way we were raised, obviously the sentiments could be the same. So growing up in Chicago to traditional tiger parents, my mom obviously, as you saw, was Filipino, my dad was Indian. There was this insurmountable pressure to be perfect. My mom was a beauty queen and came from a lineage of pageant queens. And my father was this educational, driven, successful, and wanted this first generation, us, the children, to rise. How many follow that typical story? Yes. And so, fast forward, after going through several different types of tumultuous circumstances, I learned two things. I learned, one, well, we get to choose our emotional states. Obviously, I didn't have a choice at the time. You know, when you have 3 family members start to die of diseases that you just have no control over, you start to choose the states that you want to live in. And so all of you can do that as well. So, are we following? Yeah, okay, good. So if we think about it, and if I just break it down, we have common emotional states that we face on a daily basis, right? So how many people feel, can somebody give me a couple that you probably face today? A negative emotion or a positive emotion? Maybe before coming into this room. Maybe, I used the bathroom before I came in here, and I was really excited when I saw that there was learning at the loo. So I don't know how to code, but I'm like, okay, this is great. So there you go. Happiness, that is an emotion, right? Sadness, that is an emotion. Have you ever thought how many times you actually experience these emotions on a daily basis? Or a weekly basis? Or with your spouse, who probably gets the brunt of it? Or a significant other? Or even your family members, right? People that work with you. Can anybody give me a negative emotion that's probably common in this ecosystem? Stress? Yeah, especially because we all have achievers in the room. Everyone is an achiever. That's why you guys wouldn't be here if you weren't. Disappointment. Feelings of inadequacy. Feelings of I am not, or it is not, or this is not good enough. Feelings that you're unworthy. Feelings of anger or rage, resentment. These are all the negative ones. That's pretty easy. But what about the positive feelings, right? What about joy, gratitude? How many experienced gratitude this morning? Yeah, 1, 2, 4, okay, 5, 6, 7 people. Woo. What about bliss or excitement? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, awesome. And it doesn't have to be flowery words, but I'm just giving you guys an example because it's those emotional states that if you are aware, you can actually change the perception of even the person sitting next to you, right? Or really having that understanding of what they're going through. So, and lastly, if we have time, I am going to take questions and also talk to you about a concept called 4MAS so that you can unlock these types of tools with any single human being that you come encounter with all of their baggage, because we all have some lovely stories. And sometimes we all have our masks, and our masks are really what separates us as humans. But once you actually realize that every single one of you is no different from the other, that you have the same emotions, you have the same pain points, the same insecurities, that's what unlocking empathy really is all about. It's easier to judge. It's harder to choose a different state to operate with. How many of you guys have children in the room or have little beings, mini humans that you are around? Okay, sometimes they annoy the crap out of you, right? They're amazing mini gems, but sometimes they do, right? Okay, how many of you are in a relationship? Anybody? Yeah, okay. That person will test you time and time, over and over and over again. They will see you're good, they will see you're ugly, they will see you're bad, and they have no choice. But they chose you, and you chose them. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So the 4 different types of avatars, and they are true in any sort of fashion. And just for kind of shits and giggles, we'll see how many of them are in this room. And the first one is basically, pleasing, apologetic Nancy. And so this woman is constantly trying to please, and she's trying to do the best that she can for her bosses, and she's constantly sorry, she's constantly apologizing, and she's the one baking cookies and bringing them to you and putting them on your desk and making sure she pleases everybody. What's gonna happen with pleasing, apologetic Nancy? Anybody? What's gonna happen when she hits her limit? It's never enough. Anybody else? Definite burnout. How many of you guys relate to this story? Because I know I was pleasing, apologetic Nancy. I tried to do that my whole life with all of my family. That was all about pleasing society ideals, expectations, what I should be. I was a cosmetic dentist. And not just a cosmetic dentist. I had high-profile clients that flew in from all over the world to come and see my practice in Chicago. Talk about pleasing, yeah. But it just leaves you burnt out, it leaves you resentful, and God forbid you have children then you're just going batshit crazy on them too, right? And then we have drill sergeant. We have drill sergeant who only goes by the rules and only goes by the books. And if you cross any rules, that's over because it's gotta be this way. They're always on time. And what tends to happen? Anyone? Maybe some of your bosses are this way. Managers. Someone that you've encountered at Starbucks.
It's going to be really hard to relate to that person because if you are too strict to the rules, it's very hard to drive changes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Ugh. And there's no innovation, right? So the last two, and this might be common here in this sort of environment. And how many can relate to a sergeant, drill sergeant? Maybe, yes. Repressive Charlie. Repressive Charlie is super calm, super collective, just does their work, is very, very chill. They don't have a mean bone in their body until one day they are upset. You didn't see it coming, they just blew up at you. What is wrong with that scenario? Bottle things up. Yeah, until they don't know how to communicate their feelings, right? So they repress everything. They think everything is totally fine. We see this in relationships where, and I love you guys, all the men in the room, but sometimes we just kind of tend to keep things because it's, even keel, right? Until you just nudge somebody so much that they just blow the fuck up. And last one. We have narcissistic, problematic Priscilla, where the world is constantly always about her, and there's always a problem. And if you've got a headache, her headache was 10 times bigger. And if you had something due and you couldn't get it done because something happened, she hurt herself, and everything's going wrong at home, and it's just like problems after problems after problems, and her problems are way bigger than yours. And even if you have a problem at home, somehow, some way, she thinks it's her problem. How many follow that? Yes, because sometimes we connect to problems to make us feel better than other people. Sometimes we have our problems because it actually makes us feel unique. Sometimes we have our problems, and for those of you who culturally are Indian or Filipino, many of my aunts were like this growing up. So, how the heck do you deal with them? How do you deal with these types of humans? I mean, we are all not perfect. We all have some sort of drill sergeant in us. We have some sort of repressive Charlie in us, right? We have some sort of pleasing Nancy inside of us. And we have some sort of narcissistic Priscilla inside of us, right? It just depends on the time. How many follow? Yeah? Okay. Well, there's an approach called Kovac, and okay, we're good on time, awesome. There's an approach called Kovac, C-A-V-A-C. Now, if you use this, whether you're in your groups, whether you're in your teams, whether you're in relationships, okay, and I'll tell you a little bit of how I actually formulated this. So 5 years ago, I actually left my picture-perfect marriage. Picture perfect from the outside. And I had everything that anybody can dream, right? The picture-perfect home, the first-class travel, the $1 million plus practice. I was not even 30. I was hitting every single pinnacle of success. That if I would attain that model of success, that I would please my dead parents, that I would please this ideal of what society wanted me to be. And then it just kept going. So when you hit that pinnacle, then it's okay in marriage. And I have to tell you, I hit rock bottom after realizing, and for so many years, I struggled to hide this because I didn't want anyone to think I was inadequate. I was constantly proving to other people that I wasn't this girl with a sob story. I didn't really embrace or accept where I was coming from or what these stories actually meant. And I'm saying this because some of you have some of these secrets inside of you that you think might separate you from other people, which is why we have our walls up, which is why we have our masks up. But it wasn't until things got dangerously scary in that abusive, physically and emotionally abusive marriage that I was in. So I had to take massive action, and I left. And then, of course, everything changed. And when I meant everything, I was homeless. I had to fight with lovely family, right? Because coming from a Filipino Indian background, it's very taboo to leave a marriage. How many understand that? Yes. And having the courage to actually speak about that. In fact, I was in India earlier this year, and half of my family had blocked me from Facebook because I have a pretty large following on Facebook, because they didn't want their own fathers or et cetera, family members to see what I was doing, because that's how shameful it is. So now moving forward, after hitting every single level of that, I started understanding, and I was so fascinated by human dynamics, even as a child. My first job was literally at Dr. Horrible, and literally, I kid you not, this is a true story, he was Polish. Dr. Horrible, I worked for him when I was 15 years old. I was answering phones at a dental office, hence, I became a dentist. But during that time, I understood, because I was in so much pain, that the only way that I could actually somehow articulate that pain was really to make other people happy, right? So that was the first phase of that, which then catapulted in every single arena of what I was excited to explore, which led me on a hunt to figure out and research from the scientific mind that I have, and obviously going into behavioral psychology when I was in college, how to influence and how to better communicate with others. Because obviously, as a dentist, who the heck wants to see a dentist, right? That's one of the scariest places to go to. So that was my psychology behind that at the time. Okay. And during all of these different bouts of resilience, the last 3 years took me on this chase around the world to 45 different countries, spending time with leaders in parliament, leaders in government sectors in different parts of Asia, royal families in different parts of the world, whether you were business titans, luminaries, local heroes, everything was the same. The same insecurities that we have, the same challenges that we have in our relationships, and the same CEOs and big titans who would call me and say, can you fix this? Can you actually teach empathy to my team? But it actually wasn't that. It was, can you teach empathy to me? You see, we have so much shame around how can we actually solve some of these issues, but of course it starts with us first, right? So when you actually have this for yourself, you can go out and start practicing it, and I really encourage you to do so. I'll leave you my information so you can just kind of share with me some of your insights, because I would really love some feedback on this. And so I arrived from studying Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence to Oxford to the Dalai Lama Fellows to, I mean, you name it, and I merged behavioral, social, brain science to arrive at my book called Emotional Grit. And grit really being the process, because grit really has been the story of my life so far. And this I share with you. And so what I've outlined is 11 characteristics I interviewed over 500 entrepreneurs, leaders, local heroes, titans from all different walks of life. And we arrived at these 11 characteristics. And my book actually, it published 2 months ago. It became an instant #1 bestseller on Amazon. And the biggest question that I still get flooding in my inbox is around interpersonal relationships. Now, why do you think that is? Just out of curiosity.
Require the most empathy?
Yeah. This is going to require the most challenge, right? People can study all day long to be a better programmer, to be a better speaker, to have a better business. But relationships, most of us are scared shitless, and we just let things pass, which is why we become repressive Charlies, because we don't want to touch it, because it's too scary to touch it. Because sometimes if it's too scary, sometimes we have to let some of those chapters go, and we don't want to. We don't want to shake things up. So we'd much rather live in this sort of pain or the ugliness that we know but we don't really like. How many understand that concept? Yeah, because it's safe. So Kovac, utilizing empathy in the following ways. So Kovac is C, which stands for courage, using courage. Next is you've got to be freaking honest. You've got to be authentic. And authenticity is a huge role. If now somebody asks you for feedback, are you just going to glide over the surface, or are you going to actually tell them, all right, this is what you're doing great, but I mean, you've got to step it up in this game. And if you've got to be 110% brutally honest, whether it's the ugliest truth. Now, there's one way to be overly blunt, and sometimes some of you, that's probably the best way you can do it. However, I go over in a whole section and course on how to say no tactfully and that sort of thing. But authenticity is huge. Remove that mask, and Kovac will actually help you remove your masks. Understood? Okay. V stands for vulnerability. How many of you have a hard time being vulnerable? Yeah. After I left my marriage and hit my rock bottom, it was really, really hard. I thought, because I was teaching vulnerability and I was providing the skills and the tools for people to be more vulnerable in my own personal life, I was so deeply afraid of getting into another relationship. How many have been there? Yeah. So what do? We glide on the surface, and then we think no one is good enough to have our attention. And mind you, this is not just in relationships. This could be in careers. This can be in projects that you're doing, side projects that you're doing. You're too afraid to go fully deep. How many have been there or know what I'm talking about? Yes. It's taking that leap, right? Nothing is for sure. But it's taking that leap that 110% you're going all the way in. A is adaptability. When you are adaptable, things can definitely change. If you are a drill sergeant, you all know that nothing is actually going to get done There is absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. And you can even see this in your body image, right? So even using the Kovac approach, we can actually look at certain people in the room right now who are probably going to be more open, okay? What's a stance of being more open? Just in body language, really quickly. Yeah. Taking up space, hands down, right? People are closed off, they're like this, right? So you can already tell. And some of these tiny, tiny tips we can just be more aware of, right? And C is compassion. You have got to have relentless compassion. Compassion for yourself, that you're trying something out that's new. Compassion for the other person, that they might not have evolved as much as you, or they might not really understand, or they might be so hurt from years and years and years and years of programming that that's just probably not the time yet to have that conversation. But you know better because you obviously are more aware, so then therefore you can make other decisions. You can make better decisions. How many follow that? Yeah. So Kovac, it can actually help give you more influence. I don't like to share this quite a bit because people can use this to manipulate others. You can use this to be more influential just by understanding perception and perspective. Okay. Now, how do we actually get people to begin to change? You have this Kovac approach, but what is the actual process? Now, it's the process that I call grit. And the grit process is actually the process to grow, reveal, innovate, and transform. It's 4 steps. Clearly, I like the number 4. If you go to China, it probably might not be a good thing. So grit, really when you're able to be open, right? You're able to grow. You're able to growth as the as the word growth. You're more aware. So if there's anything that I would have you take away from this talk today, is to have more awareness, because you are more than 70% ahead of the game when you just have awareness. And awareness comes when you're open to growing. Because like I said, even in body language, if we're kind of like this and not open at all, how can we actually have change? How can we actually think different thoughts? How can we actually understand some of the circumstances, some of the stressful things that have happened, not to us, right, but for us? How do we begin to become better leaders of our life because of that? The next is reveal. So if you're able to reveal or accept the circumstance, accept the situation, accept, okay, well, things that might not get done on time, and that's freaking okay. The world is not going to end. Or, shit, we might actually get a divorce. That's accepting the current reality. Can you choose a different state after that? Yes. But acceptance is the hardest thing that we actually fight as human beings. Because we want to pretend like everything is okay. But when you're actually honest with yourself, that's when true transformation, and we can actually solve these problems much better. I is for innovate. Innovate, as you can guess, obviously, is time for change. That's when you can select a different thought. That's when you can select a different approach, a different strategy. And of course, T is transformation. It's action. What are the steps that are going to help you get to that next level? If you're looking to lose weight, If you're looking to be more active, and obviously many of you are very aware already, I can already tell, otherwise this concept, this topic wouldn't be relevant for you. But you're all about improving yourself, improving your circumstances. So we all need to have an action plan. Who are you going to have in your corner? Who are you going to have that's going to help you chart the next course and step? Because it takes about, what, 3 weeks or 21 days to actually form a new habit? That is transformation. And the last concept, and then of course I'll take some questions, and this is my favorite, because in order for you all to really have and know how to navigate people, navigate stressors, navigate challenges, because life is really going to have its ups and downs. I mean, without that, you're kind of, you're on this straight plane, and you're obviously going to need to know how to build your armamentarium, right? Otherwise, life will hit you instead of you acting proactively. It's something called FORMAS. And it's what I call building your emotional grit kit. And this grit kit you can have with you wherever. This grit kit you can have when you can even use it right now. You can have during the holidays, and I encourage all of you to use this during the holidays. But what it is, it's getting clear with yourself and understanding what are types of things that you can do on a daily basis that gets you back into those happy states or happy emotions that we talked about earlier on. This is your emotional toolkit for life, for managing the stressful aspects of day-to-day grind. How many of you have a morning routine? Yeah, okay. How many have movement in their morning routine? Awesome. How many have a nutritious breakfast for their morning routine? Coffee, or there's a way you make your tea. I know for myself, I make like a constantly without fail, and I travel all the time. I told Regina I'm packed in 2 suitcases, but I always have my chai latte. Always, even if it's in a hotel room, I pack my tea bags and I go. So FORMAS is really taking your morning routine, or what I call your morning bliss, because if you don't have a morning routine, then the morning just freaking hits you, and the day just hits you, okay? But FORMAS is really what you can do to change your state. Any time of the day, anytime you're feeling stressed, anytime you have some sort of a conflict. And it consists of, and you can write this down, movement, meditation, music. How many of you have music in your morning routine? Anyone? Yeah, of course. Mantras. And by meaning mantras, I mean any sort of positive podcast or positive affirmations, maybe a positive saying that you have, a positive book that you read every morning without fail. You should have this somewhere where you can actually go to it when you need to. Haha, the handy dandy phone. A is for appreciation or gratitude. If you can think of, and I know obviously we have several different schools of thought on gratitude. If you can think of 3 things or your 3 big wins every single day, or even when you are at drill sergeant, the ugliest parts of yourself, that can really change your aspect on anything or any person in that moment. Because how many times do we have a bad day? Or we think we have a bad day, right? We think we have a bad day. But if you think about it, it's really only in that moment. Does that define who we really are as humans? No, not at all. So you screwed up with something or you yelled at someone. Does that comprise all of you? Absolutely not. So let's just take a chill pill and just be and have some more self-compassion, right? And the last one, S, is sense. Sense. So I mean smells. I talk a lot about essential oils, right? How many of you have some sort of scent that's a favorite? Or when you smell it, everything changes instantly. And I travel with two. I travel with a bergamot and a grapefruit scent. Why? Because, I mean, if I am like super exhausted after a long day of travel or speaking or doing workshops, working with a client for 8 hours who wanted me to fix a problem and we only had that time, or you're running around trying to get things done because you have a holiday party and you're not ready, literally, you take one of those scents and it can change things right away. I also carry incense sticks. So scents are really profound. If you haven't used it, definitely try to, get yourself acquainted to them. How many have candles? Yeah, a lot of women, of course, we're all sensory human beings, so yes. So formos, it is highly powerful. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to leave it to any questions and answers.
We often learn a lot of theory, and then when it comes to actually putting things to practice, it becomes difficult to, maybe even hit one or two of the letters shared. So what's a tip for actually making many of the things you've shared actionable?
Journal. How many of you have some sort of something to keep your notes on? One person in the room, 2, 3, 4, okay. I'm like, there has to be more of you. So if I can ask you, based on everything that we've talked about, what do you think that you can actually take into your daily practice? With a journal, writing in your notebook, writing in your phone, writing it on an Evernote or whatever you guys have at Google. Yeah.
I was just talking to an aromatherapist yesterday about getting some bergamot and grapefruit. Exactly those two things.
Okay, well there you go.
You're right. I mean, I find that smell really changes your mood instantly.
Yeah. So maybe it's just getting 2 cents. Your 2 cents for the holidays. Anyone else?
I would say just have a little quiet time and meditate.
Now, this brings me another question. So obviously, many of you run many different things. How do you actually have the time to fill your cups up? Like, do you have an actual time per day that you set aside? Yes, no, maybe so, I don't know, I don't care, doesn't matter. How show of hands, is it anybody? I'm seeing no's. Kind of, sort of. Okay. After this talk, what do you think you can actually implement going forward? 10 minutes, really, is all we need. 10 minutes. And if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself, it's a pretty big problem. If you can set aside just 10 minutes, starting tomorrow, and in fact, if those of you who are interested, I am running this emotional grit accelerator for the new year. Basically, it's a 6-week, it's obviously purely digital, it's online. I have a global base of a group of, basically a global base of amazing humans that we meet every week. And if you want to be part of that, we're doing a specific one, obviously, for the new year. But if you're really like struggling in some of these concepts or some of these areas, and I shouldn't say struggle, you just didn't know any better, and it's okay. I'm making you all aware, which is why you guys made the first step to come into this room and sit the entire time. But focusing on you and regaining and reclaiming that balance is so fucking important, because how the heck can you show up for somebody else? How can you show up for your projects, and how can you show up for being a better version of yourself if inside you're just, there's no center? Okay, and we're doing this so much, and we do this so much, and for a lot of my ladies in the room, we are so fucking hard on ourselves. It is not even funny. I was just at an event for a whole week with a ton of leaders, and I didn't realize how much I had attached my worth to exercise. Because if I wasn't exercising every single day or 2 times a day, I would just feel so awful. So anyways, this Emotional Grit Accelerator, we go through for 6 weeks, and we basically kind of do a deeper dive into some of the concepts that I talked about today, and really making sure that you just have accountability, you have a group that you actually are kind of practicing some of these concepts back and forth. Neeta at globalgritinstitute.com. So you can, say hello or drop me a note, drop me a line. So globalgritinstitute.com. Neeta is spelled N-E-E-T-A. I would love to hear, tons from you, but what other questions? Now it's just an open floor. So we've got about 6 minutes or 8 minutes left.
Okay, so in your grit framework, you mentioned that part of the hardest part is acceptance. I think in that key, when you're working with other people, maybe not just for ourselves, since we're all here now and we're, thank God, aware, is that how do you facilitate that process? Is there, specific suggestions that you have to get to that point of acceptance?
So let me understand the question. So she asked, since everyone else in the room is really aware, how do you teach acceptance, right? So teaching it in the context of when you're actually in groups with other people? Yeah. Really, it starts out with having an open dialogue. Because most of the time, let me teach you guys this. Let me see how much you guys grasped. So if somebody is afraid to accept where they're at, what are they actually hiding? And some of you guys answered some of this before when we talked about the 4 different avatars, right? Pleasing Nancy, it's never going to be enough for her, so she burns out. But for somebody who just doesn't want to accept, what are they actually, what is their basic psychology? Yeah, they're insecure, absolutely. That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they're insecure. And why are they insecure? They have this mask on. So if they have this mask on, which most of us do, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just being aware of what we do as human beings, because a lot of times it's our ego. A lot of times our ego really, protects us, and it protects us from the craziness of the world, right? So of course we wear our masks, and of course when we talk to people that really have like double or triple masks, and if you're asking them something or telling them something, how many get this, and I'll get to the point in a second, but you say it and they become defensive, and then it starts a whole, fight, and a conflict happens, and there's nothing that gets resolved. Well, what is it? It's because it's their insecurity. So if you take this one other nugget, and I'll let you guys go, but one other nugget is, when we are in a conflict with another person and the other person gets defensive or we get defensive, majority of the time it's because parts of that is probably true, or we haven't even thought about that. Does that make sense? So it's basically shaking our brain functioning a little bit, because our brains are like, wait a minute, you're saying something that wait, it might be true, but I don't know how to react. So I don't know how to react, so I'm gonna be defensive because that is actually not me. How many understand that? Yeah, we all do it. So it's something our brain does, right? So I ask you all to have self-compassion, right? But then also give yourself the time to really think about it and say, oh shoot, well maybe they did say that, and maybe I do that occasionally, and I wonder when, and I wonder how. So being open to that sort of thing. And of course, we're humans, so we're just going to have to kind of be okay with making some of these mistakes, but then also kind of learning how to navigate that, which is the beauty of interpersonal relationships. So lastly, I just wanted to say that if any of you all are interested in, I do have an assessment that I give primarily to leaders. I do a lot of workshops all over the States. I basically spend half of my time in Asia, in Singapore and in India. I actually leave tonight. And so I do a lot of just live webinars and courses. I do have a webinar this Sunday, actually. I will be in Malaysia. And so that's going to be streaming. So if you're interested in that, I'm also doing one for Christmas for you lovely ladies in the first quarter, a course on becoming boundless. So if any of that interests you, let me know. But finally, if you give me your information, or Regina your information, some of the things, I have a whole worksheet that talks about every single thing that we talked about today and how to actually implement it if you wanted to do this in, with your teams, facilitate it however you want. I actually had a group of doctors that just wrote me a note that they were doing it for all of their staff at Cedars-Sinai in Beverly Hills. And so, whatever sector we're in, we can all kind of utilize different approaches. And so thank you for your time, and happy holidays to you all. Cheers to 2017, you guys, and I'm around. Thank you.